Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All of us agree that it is important and even critical to keep kids with parents. This is an area where there should be common ground. We should be able to work together. Nobody wants to see children separated from their moms and dads. All of us should also agree that we don't want a system that incentivizes more and more children to be brought here illegally, to be subject to violence and assault from human traffickers, that it's not good for kids, for little boys and little girls, to be in the custody of criminal cartels, taken across the border and subjected to the horrors that they currently experience. Our conduct, our policies, has a direct impact on what happens at the border. There's a lot of discussion about DACA, President Obama's executive amnesty. It's worth remembering that in 2011, before DACA existed, there were roughly 6,000 unaccompanied minors that crossed the border illegally. Now, 6,000 is 6,000 too many little kids subjected to violence. But then in June of 2015, when President Obama issued DACA, we saw those numbers skyrocket. They went to 34,000 in 2013, and in 2014 to 90,000 children. From 6,000 in the year 2011 to 90,000 in 2014. Those are the consequences of our policies. And the Department of Homeland Security at the time, interviewing those kids, when asking those kids, why are you coming? They would say, we're coming because we get a permiso. If we get here, we're allowed to stay, we're welcomed, we're released, and that's why they were coming. 90,000 little boys and little girls facing horrible abuse from human traffickers. None of us should want a system that encourages more and more kids to face those abuses. A number of our colleagues have gone to see detention centers in the past few weeks. I would note in 2013, 2014, multiple times I visited detention centers that the Obama administration had stood up, filled with thousands of children, little boys and little girls. It was horrific then, and it's horrific now. Now, I'm glad that President Trump acted yesterday with his executive order. I think it was the right thing to do. I think it was an interim step. The real solution needs to come from Congress, and we can do that. There is agreement, I believe, between both Republicans and Democrats that children belong with their parents. We should codify that agreement. We should put it into law. But at the same time, there are two different ways to do that. Some congressional Democrats have proposed codifying it in a way that would mandate effectively releasing everyone who's apprehended. That would mandate, under the Flores decisions, under existing law, that if kids must stay with their parents and the kids must be released, therefore the parents must be released. If that remains the position of congressional Democrats, that the only outcome that is acceptable is releasing all of the illegal immigrants who are detained, that's not going to be an outcome that's going to pass Congress. That's not going to earn bipartisan support. It may well be a partisan exercise where the Democrats vote for one bill and the Republicans vote for another bill and nothing passes, but that's not going to command the support of both houses of Congress and the President. On the other hand, if we pass legislation, I've introduced legislation, Senator Tillis has introduced legislation, both very similar. If we pass legislation that mandates kids should stay with their parents, we will protect kids and keep kids but with their parents, and we're going to enforce the law. We're not going to release those who come here illegally. We're going to have safe, secure shelters for families and expedite processing. One of the great challenges right now that makes this issue very difficult is to get an asylum case processed. Can take weeks, can take months, potentially years. That makes it very, very difficult of what to do with people in dire distress while the case is pending. That's why the legislation I've introduced dramatically accelerates the processing of these claims, doubles the number of federal immigration judges, adds additional resources so that each case can be adjudicated ideally within 14 days, so that you get a resolution if someone has a valid claim for asylum. that claim should be granted. We should resolve it and grant the claim. And if someone doesn't have a valid claim of asylum, that claim should be adjudicated, and they should be returned to their home country promptly. If we expedite the proceedings, that greatly facilitates solving this problem. And so it's my hope that we see genuine bipartisan cooperation on this. Now, I recognize it's an election season. We're a few months out from November, and there are significant attractions to treating this as a political issue. I hope both sides will resist those attractions. If we focus on solving the problem, I will say I've had a number of very positive, encouraging conversations with Senate Democrats. I hope those conversations follow up with real and good faith action, because on my side, and I think this is true of the Republican conference, we want to solve this problem in a way that keeps kids with parents and also respects the rule of law. We can do that, and let me note also, the way to do that is focus on this problem specifically. Don't try to solve every conceivable immigration problem all at once. If this bill turns into a Christmas tree and you get the Gang of Eight and you get this and that and everything else added to it, it's not going to pass.
If it's appropriate.
The way to actually pass legislation that fixes this problem is focus specifically on keep kids together and follow the rule of law. I appreciate the outreach I've received from Democratic colleagues, and I hope that we can move forward in a bipartisan way to solve this problem together. Several members have urged that we refrain from overheated rhetoric, and I think that would be beneficial in solving this issue. You know, I would note that in the course of this debate, a number of senators draw analogies to Japanese internment camps. In my view, that analogy is both inapt and not helpful for solving this. It is inapt. Look, Japanese internment camps are one of the ugliest chapters of our nation's history. They were grossly wrong and immoral. Now, it may be worth pausing to remember, it was a Democratic president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who created those camps and who detained thousands of American citizens against their will who violated no law. They had violated no criminal law. They had done nothing other than simply being Japanese American. And yet President Roosevelt detained them and imprisoned them. That was grotesquely wrong. The analogy here is markedly different. If you have people who have crossed the border illegally and violated the law doing so, it is not an internment camp to detain someone who breaks the law. That is based on conduct. It's based on criminal conduct. And using that kind of rhetoric, that if you have someone crossing illegally and you detain them, well, it's just an internment camp, all that does is escalate the emotion and the anger on this issue. And I would encourage all of our colleagues to try to take a step back and focus on, we want kids to stay with their parents, but engaging in insults back and forth, Democrat and Republican, is not going to end up being conducive to solving the problem.